Hi athletes, I hope you had a great discussion in your groups and that you were able to process with others that first session. My name is Ruth Riley Hunter and I'm going to give you a quick bio and then share some of my journey with you. Born largely to a single parent, grew up mostly on a farm in Indiana, older sister, younger brother. Faith has always been a staple of my life. I really can't remember a time where I didn't know God growing up, but obviously that relationship with him has evolved over the years. I was able to get a scholarship to play at the University of Notre Dame. The sports I love is basketball, and really been fortunate throughout my career to win a NCAA championship, 2 WNBA championships, and Olympic Gold Medals. So you could say that God has really blessed me to be on some pretty amazing teams. What I want to share with you, though, is my journey and how from high school to college and really from college to pros, how I really wrestled with and started to take ownership of my faith. At Notre Dame, we didn't have an organized group on campus. There was no Athletes in Action or FCA. So we had a little self-led student athlete group where we would get together and praise and worship and encourage each other. So for me at Notre Dame, it challenged me in two ways. I grew up with a very childlike faith. I think I've always had a really strong conviction of right and wrong. But at Notre Dame, we had to take 2 theology and philosophy classes. And those classes challenged me to really think through the knowledge of my faith. It tested why I believe what I believe. How does that stand up to other arguments around the world? And so I think that gave me more of an intellectual base to go on than what I had growing up. But then, as you know, in college you're faced with a lot of other temptations that you just don't experience before them, and so that challenges your consciousness. For me, was I tuned into to really obey that small guiding voice that was telling me what's right and wrong, and so I feel like that was an area, obviously, of life where you're just tempted in different ways. From Notre Dame, I went on to the WNBA, and that was a culture shock. I went from South Bend, Indiana to South Beach. As a farm girl, you can imagine how that really was a new experience for me. It challenged me in so many ways. On the court, I just went from this amazing group of peers that I just played with. We just won a national championship together in my senior year. Now I'm competing with and against the best athletes in the world. So on a competition level, that really challenged me. It's humbling. Anytime you take a step up from high school to college or from college to pros, I think that is there's real humility in understanding that now you have to continue to work on your craft in order to compete at that level. But for me, when it came to my faith, that especially rookie year here in Miami is where I took ownership of my faith, where for the first time we had a team chaplain. Most professional sports leagues have a chapel service before every game. In basketball, for us, it's an hour before tip-off. You have that 15-minute window where you can get a quick word. And my chaplain here in Miami was somebody that I started to meet with on a regular basis. And I took ownership of my faith by taking intentional actions. For me, I didn't want to be an athlete with just good intentions, but I wanted those to be lived out in my life. And I knew that I had to be very intentional about the decisions that I was making, because those decisions would ultimately impact the story that one day I would tell and the direction that my life would go. So some of those intentional actions for me were meeting one-on-one with our team chaplain. She has been one of the strongest influences in my life, really a guiding spiritual mentor for me. And she taught me really just so many things. First of all, how to study the Word. I was really naive coming in. I had so many simple questions, but I didn't have anyone to ask them to. And so she was a sounding board, a wealth of knowledge. She really answered my questions. But then as I started to grow, she taught me how to seek those answers for myself, how to dig deeper, how to study the Word, what a quiet time actually meant, what that would look like for me as an athlete, how could I incorporate that into my daily schedule and activity. she also impacted my life by just watching how she lived, how she served. She has an incredible marriage, and for me, coming from a broken home, I just love the fact that I could not just observe how her and her husband worked together, but could ask her questions, could seek that knowledge, because I knew one day I wanted to be married too, and I wanted it to be a life-giving marriage that I feel like God was calling me to. And so I took very intentional steps into seeking out those marriages that I thought really God was a part of. And on a side note, I just want to share with you, about 20 years later, I just got married 3 years ago to the most incredible man. And you can imagine in those 20 years, though, there was a lot of time where I had doubts. And I'm sure that you guys are wrestling with relationship decisions right now. So I want to encourage you guys to keep the faith, to know that whatever God's deposited in you, to really be hungry for in a partner, that person is out there. And so to keep making the right decisions that will lead you ultimately to that path. I am incredibly blessed by my husband, Benjamin, and he makes me better in every way. So let's get back to being intentional. She also was the leader of our small group. We had this group of incredible women that we would meet together with every Wednesday, and that taught me how to be prepared for a small group, how to really study, but it also gave me this environment where I had women of all different walks of life and all different experiences that I could share and hear their experiences, but also, a women that could pray for me, that were a sense of community for me. And that really, I think, was a powerful tool for me in those years and moving forward. I also was very intentional about finding a church home. And it's something that I didn't do in college. But once I got down here to Miami, I knew that I wanted to dig deeper. And so I wanted to set in some roots into the community here. And so I really found a great church home while I was here. Other ways that God challenged me to put my faith into action was around my voice. I grew up really shy. I was this tall, awkward, and introverted basketball player. And so as God augmented my platform, as he continued to unveil my story, being able to articulate his involvement in that has really been part of my testimony. He's stretched my comfort zones, not just to be able to share my testimony in large groups, but also to be a vocal leader on my team, to really bring my teammates together and to establish Bible studies within each team that I would go to. And so I want to encourage you all to really be open to God stretching those comfort zones. Currently, I do radio and TV for the Miami Heat, and I can tell you, as an introvert, somebody told me one day I would be on TV doing Heat games that I would have not believed them. But I'm really just a testimony of God continuing to, step by step, each situation, mold and shape me and challenge me in ways that he wants to ultimately use me for his glory. And it's not always going to be comfort. And so I've experienced that, but I've also experienced just the amazingness of God working through you. And so just want to encourage you to be open to those opportunities, because now you find yourselves in unprecedented times. And my heart really goes out to all you athletes for what you're dealing with right now with COVID. I understand that you can't compete in the ways that you're used to. You don't have the sense of community that we love that sports creates, where we have that physical contact and that community. And it's difficult. But I do believe that God can uniquely work in these circumstances. And so in some ways, you are all uniquely primed to learn something from God that I feel like, whether it's resilience, whether it's how to take ownership when now you can't meet physically, how do you take that step to create your small group? How do you find those mentors that can really invest in your life? What does that mean to be able to take the situation that you find yourself in, to continue to map out your testimony, to know what that is and how you want to articulate that to others. And there's so many ways that I think God is working in these times. So I want to encourage you to keep the faith. I can't even imagine how difficult this is, but I know that God's at work, and He's at work through each of you. And so I just want to encourage you on that journey. I want to close with something that one of my favorite pastors is Andy Stanley out of Atlanta. And he says, when we get on the other side of what we're experiencing now, when we're telling the story looking back, right now we have the opportunity to dictate what that story is. And so I just want to encourage you to be very intentional about the decisions you're making right now, because in the future, when you look back on this stage in your life, these decisions are going to shape the direction that you go in. And one of those directions I know can be working with Athletes in Action and partnering with them in some of the work they do globally. And as an athlete who's traveled the world and seen the platform of sport and see how powerful that platform is, Athletes in Action they're just doing tremendous work. So I want to encourage you to be prayerful about how you might be able to partner with them in utilizing your platform for His glory. Thank you so much.